I can't take it anymore. Those 5 words from my boss's wife, Sarah, shattered every boundary I'd carefully built the night I drove her to somewhere private, somewhere I'd sworn I'd never take anyone, especially not the woman I'd been falling for in silence for 18 agonizing months. My name is David. I'm 34 years old, and I'm Marcus Sterling's executive assistant. But the truth I've been hiding is that every morning when I arrive at that mansion, my heart doesn't race because of the job. It races because I might see her. Sarah Sterling, my boss's wife, the woman I had no right to love but couldn't stop loving anyway. She was 38, elegant, with eyes that held oceans of sadness I wanted to drown in, and a smile she wore like armor against a marriage that was killing her slowly. For 18 months I'd been dying in the most exquisite torture, loving a woman I could never have, watching her waste away in a gilded cage while Marcus, my boss, my mentor, the man who saved my life after my divorce destroyed me, remained blind to the treasure he was losing. Every conversation with Sarah felt like stealing fire, dangerous, addictive, inevitable. The way she remembered my daughter's name, the way her hand would brush mine when I handed her coffee. The way she looked at me like I was water, and she'd been crawling through a desert for years. I told myself it was friendship. I told myself I was just being kind. But late at night, alone in my apartment, I stopped lying. I was in love with my boss's wife, and it was destroying me. Then came November 18th, their 12th anniversary, and everything I'd been holding back came crashing down. Marcus abandoned her for a Singapore board meeting, and I arrived at their Westchester mansion at 8:47 p.m. to find Sarah in her evening gown, barefoot, broken, holding an anniversary card with another woman's name on it. The rain outside matched the storm in her eyes. "I can't take it anymore," she whispered, and those 5 words landed like an invitation and a warning, a cry for help and a test I knew I might fail. My hands were shaking, my heart was hammering, because I knew that if I did what every fiber of my being was screaming to do, if I reached for her, if I pulled her close, if I let 18 months of buried longing finally surface, I would cross a line that would destroy 3 lives, hers, Marcus's, and mine. But I couldn't leave her there, drowning in that empty mansion with its cold champagne and colder marriage. "Get your coat," I heard myself say. "I'm taking you somewhere private." Her eyes met mine, and in that moment, we both knew this wasn't about comfort or friendship anymore. This was about the dangerous truth we'd been dancing around for 18 months, that somewhere between the coffee shop conversations and the careful glances, between the birthday I remembered when her husband forgot, and the night she cried in my car and I pretended not to notice, we'd fallen into something that had no name but felt more real than anything either of us had touched in years. "Where?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Somewhere I've never taken anyone," I said. "Somewhere I go when I need to remember what real feels like." She went upstairs and came back transformed. Jeans, sweater, face bare, walls down. And when she looked at me, I saw it clearly for the first time. She didn't just trust me. She wanted me. And God help me, I wanted her back with an intensity that terrified me. I drove her away from her life at 9:17 p.m. with my hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles went white, heading toward Montauk Point, toward the lighthouse where I took my daughter on quiet weekends, toward a cliff where the ocean crashes loud enough to drown out the voice of conscience. 2.5 hours alone in the dark with the woman I loved, the woman who belonged to the man I owed everything to, the woman who was looking at me like I held the key to a prison she'd been locked in for 12 years. The rain fell, the miles disappeared, and somewhere around mile 47, when "The Night We Met" came on the radio and her hand drifted toward mine on the center console, stopping just close enough that I could feel the heat of her skin without touching it, I realized this drive to somewhere private wasn't about saving her from her marriage anymore. It was about whether I could save us both from the fire we'd been building, spark by spark, glance by glance, unspoken word by unspoken word, for 18 months. "David," she said softly as the city lights faded behind us and the darkness wrapped around us like permission. "I need to tell you something I've never said out loud." My heart stopped, because I knew that whatever she was about to confess would either kill this thing between us or bring it roaring to life. I'm listening, I managed, my voice rough with everything I'd been holding back. That night 3 weeks ago when I came out of the doctor's appointment crying and you drove me home the long way without asking why. She paused and I could hear her breathing change. I'd just had a miscarriage, Marcus's baby, and all I could think about, sitting in that back seat watching you in the rearview mirror, was that I wished it had been your child, that I wished I'd made different choices, that I wished I'd married you instead. The words hit me like a physical blow. The car swerved slightly before I corrected it, my vision blurring at the edges. Sarah, let me finish, she said, and there was steel in her voice now, the kind that comes from finally deciding to stop hiding. I've been performing for 12 years, David. The corporate wife, the perfect hostess, the woman who smiles at charity galas while her husband forgets her name. But with you, I don't have to perform. When you look at me, I feel like I exist again. Like I'm not just furniture in Marcus's perfectly decorated life, she turned, in her seat to face me fully, and I could feel her eyes on my profile, even though I couldn't look at her without risking us both. I know this is wrong, she continued, her voice breaking. I know you owe Marcus everything. I know I'm married and you work for him and this should never have happened. But David, I'm so tired of doing what I'm supposed to do. I'm so tired of being good and quiet and grateful for a life that's slowly killing me. At mile 63, I finally spoke. What are you asking me, Sarah? I'm not asking you anything, she said. I'm just telling you the truth, that for 18 months you've been the only real thing in my life. That I wake up in the morning and the only reason I get out of bed is because there's a chance I might see you. That I've fallen in love with you, and I know I have no right to, but I can't pretend anymore. The rain had stopped, but the windshield wipers kept moving, a rhythmic sound that matched my racing heartbeat. I should have pulled over. I should have told her this was impossible, that we needed to turn around, that she was just broken and lonely and looking for someone to save her. But I didn't, because at mile 71, I started talking too. And once I started, I couldn't stop. 6 years ago, I was standing in my apartment with divorce papers in my hand, trying to figure out if my life was worth living anymore, I said. My wife had left me for my best friend. My daughter barely knew me because I'd been working 80-hour weeks trying to build something that mattered. I had nothing. I was nothing. And then Marcus hired me, and I thought he was saving me. I paused, swallowing hard against the lump in my throat. But it wasn't Marcus who saved me, Sarah. It was you. The first time I saw you, you were in the garden at the mansion, and you were crying. You didn't know I was there. You were just sitting on that stone bench with your face in your hands, and you looked so alone it broke something in me. And I thought, here's someone who understands what drowning feels like, even when you're surrounded by everything that's supposed to make you happy. At mile 89, the highway opened up, and in the distance I could see the first hints of the ocean, a dark line against a darker sky. Every day for 18 months, I continued, I've walked into that mansion and told myself I was just being professional. Just being kind. But the truth is, I started living for those moments with you. The coffee in the morning. The way you'd ask about Lily and actually remember what I told you. The night you touched my shoulder and said I was kinder than I knew. Sarah, I went home and cried, because no one had seen me like that in years. My voice was shaking now, and I didn't care. I'm in love with you, I said. I've been in love with you for so long I can't remember what it felt like before. And it's killing me, because I can't have you. And even if I could, what kind of man would I be? Marcus trusts me. He saved me. And here I am, driving his wife to a private cliff in the middle of the night, confessing that I want her more than I've ever wanted anything in my entire life. The silence that followed was so heavy I could barely breathe. Then Sarah did something that changed everything. She reached across the center console and placed her hand on top of mine on the gear shift. Not close to it, not hovering near it, but actually touching it, skin to skin, her fingers lacing through mine with a certainty that felt like jumping off a bridge. Then let's just have tonight, she whispered, just one night where we stop being the people we're supposed to be and just are. No guilt, no tomorrow, just Us and the ocean and the truth. At mile 112, I should have pulled my hand away. I should have told her this was exactly why we couldn't go to that cliff, why I needed to turn around and take her home before we did something we could never undo. But I didn't pull away. I held her hand tighter, and I kept driving toward Montauk Point, toward the lighthouse, toward the private place where I'd sworn I'd never take anyone, especially not her. Because the truth was, I'd already crossed the line 18 months ago. I'd crossed it the first time I memorized the way she took her coffee. I'd crossed it when I started taking the long route home just to give her a few more minutes of peace. I'd crossed it every time I looked at her and wished she was mine. Tonight wasn't about crossing a line. It was about finally admitting we'd been on the other side all along. We arrived at Montauk Point at 11:34 p.m., and the world felt like it had been holding its breath just for us. The lighthouse stood dark against a sky that had cleared while we drove, stars scattered like broken glass across black velvet. The ocean below crashed against the rocks with a sound that was both violent and soothing, a rhythm that matched the chaos inside my chest. I parked on the cliff overlook, the same spot where I brought Lily on Saturday mornings when the world felt too heavy, and I needed to remember that some things were bigger than my problems. But tonight, bringing Sarah here felt like bringing her into the most sacred part of myself, the place where I came to be honest when I couldn't be honest anywhere else. We sat in the car for a moment, neither of us moving, both of us knowing that once we stepped out, something would shift that we couldn't shift back. The engine ticked as it cooled. Sarah's hand was still in mine, and I could feel her pulse through her, fingertips, fast and scared and alive. "Are you sure you want to do this?" I asked, even though I wasn't sure I could turn back even if she said no. She looked at me, and in the dashboard light, I could see tears on her cheeks that she hadn't bothered to wipe away. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. We got out of the car, and the cold hit us immediately, November wind cutting through our clothes like it was trying to wake us up, trying to remind us of reality. But Sarah just wrapped her arms around herself and walked toward the edge of the cliff, and I followed her like I'd been following her in my heart for 18 months. She stopped about 10 feet from the drop-off, where the ground sloped down toward the rocks and the ocean beyond. The wind whipped her hair around her face, and she'd never looked more beautiful or more fragile. I came up beside her, and without thinking, I took off my jacket and draped it over her shoulders. "You'll freeze," she said, but she pulled it tighter around herself anyway. "I'll survive," I said, and we both knew I wasn't just talking about the cold. For a long time, we just stood there, listening to the ocean, watching the waves catch starlight and throw it back into the darkness. The wind carried the smell of salt and seaweed and something wild that made me feel like we were standing at the edge of the world, where normal rules didn't apply, and maybe, just maybe, we could have this one moment before reality came crashing back. "I used to paint," Sarah said suddenly, her voice barely louder than the wind. "Before Marcus, before the corporate wife performance. I had a studio in Brooklyn, and I'd spend entire days covered in paint, creating these massive canvases of empty rooms. My therapist said it was me trying to process loneliness, but I just thought they were beautiful. The way light falls in an empty space, the way silence has texture." She turned to look at me, and the moonlight caught her face in a way that made my breath stop. "Marcus told me to give it up 3 weeks before our wedding. Said it wasn't appropriate for someone in his position to have a wife who played artist. He bought me a Mercedes SUV instead. Said I'd need it for driving our future children to soccer practice." She laughed, but it was bitter and broken. "I never even learned how to drive that car. It's been sitting in the garage for 12 years. "Why didn't you leave?" I asked, and immediately regretted it because I could see the answer in her eyes before she even spoke. "Because I thought this was what love looked like," she said simply. "My parents had this kind of marriage, practical, stable. My mother always said passion fades, but security lasts. So when Marcus proposed with a 5-carat diamond and a prenup, I thought I was being smart. I thought I was choosing wisely." She stepped closer to the edge, and my hand instinctively reached for her arm, holding her back from danger the way I'd wanted to. Hold her back from everything that had hurt her for the past 12 years. "But you know what I learned, David?" she continued, not pulling away from my hand. "Security is just another word for cage when you're locked in with someone who doesn't actually see you. I've spent 12 years being safe and stable and slowly disappearing. and then you showed up, and for the first time since I gave up painting, I felt like maybe I was still visible. Maybe I still existed underneath all the performance. I should have let go of her arm. Instead, I pulled her back from the edge and turned her to face me. And suddenly, we were standing so close, I could see the exact moment her breath caught, could count the freckles the makeup usually hid, could feel the heat coming off her body despite the cold. "You exist," I said, and my voice came out rougher than I intended. "Sarah, you're the most real thing I've ever known. Every morning when I walk into that mansion, I'm not thinking about Marcus or the job or any of it. I'm thinking about whether you'll be in the kitchen, and if you are, whether you'll smile at me the way you do when you think no one's watching. That real smile, not the one you wear for everyone else." Her hands came up to my chest, not pushing me away, but resting there like she needed to feel proof that I was real too. "What are we doing, David?" she whispered. "What is this?" And that was the question, wasn't it? The one we'd been avoiding for 18 months. The one that had 1,000 wrong answers and maybe, just maybe, one right one. "I don't know," I admitted. "But I know that I've spent 6 years rebuilding myself after my divorce, piece by piece, trying to become someone my daughter could be proud of. Someone who had integrity and honor and all those words that are supposed to matter. And then I met you. And suddenly, all those words felt like excuses for being too afraid to feel anything real. The ocean crashed below us, violent and beautiful, and I could feel Sarah trembling under my jacket, or maybe I was the one trembling. I couldn't tell anymore. "I'm scared," she said. "I'm so scared, David. Because if I let myself have this, if I let myself have you even for one night, I don't know how I go back to that mansion and pretend I'm okay with dying slowly in a marriage to a man who can't even remember my name on our anniversary." "Then don't go back," I said, and the words were out before I could stop them. She looked up at me, eyes wide, and I could see hope and terror fighting for space in her expression. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that life is too short to live it for other people. I'm saying that my daughter asked me last month if I'd ever fall in love again, and I told her I didn't know if I could. But Sarah, I was lying. Because I'd already fallen. I'd fallen for you so hard and so completely that every other woman I've tried to date has felt like a poor substitute for the real thing." My hands moved to her face, cradling it like something precious and breakable, my thumbs wiping away tears that kept falling no matter how many times I caught them. "I'm saying that Marcus might have given me a job, but you gave me a reason to show up to it. I'm saying that loyalty is supposed to mean something, and it does, but so does love. Real love. The kind that makes you want to be better instead of smaller. The kind that sees you at your worst and doesn't ask you to perform or pretend or be anything other than exactly who you are." She was crying openly now, her hands clutching my shirt like I was the only thing keeping her from falling off the edge of the world. "If I leave him, I lose everything," she said. "The prenup is ironclad. I get nothing. No house, no money, no security, just whatever I can fit in a suitcase and the knowledge that I blew up a 12-year marriage for what? For the possibility of something with you? For the chance at being happy when I don't even remember what happy feels like anymore? Yes," I said simply, "for all of that. Because Sarah, what's the alternative? You go back and take more pills and paint on that smile and pretend for another 12 years until you've forgotten that you ever wanted more? Until Emma grows up and gets married and repeats the same pattern because that's what you taught her love looks like?" The mention of her daughter made her flinch, and I knew I'd hit something true. "Emma called me last week from school," she said quietly. "She wanted to know if Dad was going to make it to her winter showcase. I told her I'd ask him, and she laughed. Actually laughed. She said, 'Mom, you don't have to pretend anymore. I know he doesn't care. I just wondered if you'd noticed too.'" Her voice broke completely then, and she buried her face in my chest, her whole body shaking with sobs that sounded like they'd been waiting 12 years to escape. I held her while she cried, my arms wrapped around her like I could hold. Together, all the pieces Marcus had let fall apart. The wind howled around us, and the ocean kept crashing, and somewhere above us the lighthouse beam cut through the darkness in steady, reliable intervals, a reminder that even in the deepest night, there were still things you could count on to guide you home. When she finally looked up at me, her face was blotchy and her eyes were red, and she'd never looked more beautiful. "I'm falling apart," she said. "No," I corrected gently. "You're finally letting yourself feel everything you've been holding back. That's not falling apart, Sarah. That's waking up." She reached up and touched my face, her fingers tracing my jawline like she was memorizing it, like she was trying to decide if I was real or just another dream that would disappear when morning came. "If I kiss you right now," she whispered, "everything changes. We can't go back. We can't pretend this didn't happen. We can't—" "I know," I said. "Marcus will destroy you." "Marcus? He'll make sure you never work in this city again. He'll use every connection, every resource, "I know. And I'll lose everything. The house, the security, the life I've built, even if it's been killing me. I know, Sarah. I know all of it, and I'm still standing here." She studied my face for a long moment, and I could see her making the calculation, weighing everything she'd lose against everything she might gain. And I wanted to tell her it would be worth it, that we'd figure it out together, that love was enough to build a new life on. But I'd learned enough from my own divorce to know that wasn't always true. Sometimes love wasn't enough. Sometimes the practical realities crushed even the strongest feelings. Sometimes you could want something with your whole heart and still have to walk away from it. So instead of making promises I couldn't guarantee, I just stood there and let her choose. Let her decide if I was worth the cost, if she was worth the cost to herself. And then, at 11:47 p.m. on a cliff overlooking the Atlantic Ocean, Sarah Sterling made her choice. She leaned in, and I felt every muscle in my body tense with anticipation, with desire, with 18 months of wanting condensed into a single moment. Her lips were inches from mine, her breath warm against my face, her eyes closed, and I could smell her perfume mixed with salt air and rain and everything I'd ever wanted. And then my phone buzzed in my pocket. The sound cut through the moment like a knife, and Sarah pulled back slightly, her eyes opening, confusion and hurt flickering across her face. "Ignore it," she whispered. But I couldn't, because the buzzing had a pattern, 3 short bursts, the emergency signal I'd set up with my ex-wife for anything involving Lily. My hands were shaking as I pulled out the phone, and Sarah stepped back, wrapping my jacket tighter around herself as the wind picked up. The text was from Lily. "Dad, can we go to Montauk this weekend? I miss the lighthouse. I miss you. Mom says you're too busy with work, but I told her you always make time."